Looked like he just got off the golf course. And you know what? I might be correct. It's Jarrod Ficklin. He joins me. He is senior producer at NBC Sports, has worked a lot with Golf Channel over the years. And he is someone who tells a lot of other people's stories. And now we're going to have the pristine opportunity to tell his story here on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, national radio anchor, a golf broadcaster, and commentator for Tennis Channel. Six-time National Sports Emmy Award winner, and the accolades will continue to flow in. But Jarrod, I appreciate you doing this. We're looking forward to this conversation.
No, I appreciate everything you do, Bryan. So happy to join.
The idea of you changing through the course of your career, obviously starting up at ESPN and now at NBC, you've learned a lot. What hasn't changed about you as a storyteller since those early years?
What hasn't changed and has been the constant is that stories will always be there. What I do is kind of work in the features world and try to find the best sports stories that exist. And since sports have been played, there's been human stories to give fans rooting interests, and all we really try to do is bring out that human element of each athlete and give people a reason to root for them and a reason to watch, even more so than they already have with their allegiances of where they're from or who they grew up rooting for. But yeah, it's just expanding the sports world to more humans, just to try to reach a broader audience.
With the storytelling theme and the humanizing aspect that you bring to it, I was recently watching your Bryson DeChambeau piece and with his father and the ability for him to get the new kidney and how eloquently you guys told that story about how there was a match with a kidney and, you know, the tearjerker that was. How has telling other people's stories made you better understand yourself?
It's made me, everybody goes through personal struggles. It's made me compartmentalize things more, I think, and try to dig down to the real emotions of every story. Everybody has things they've gone through their entire life, me included, and everybody that we focus on included. So it's just a matter of really getting down to the basics of those emotions. I think pre-interview is very important, getting to realize what their actual emotions are and how we can bring that out as far as the story structure goes. And it's really simplifying. Sometimes the best question you can ask is no question at all, is to just sit there and listen and let them continue to tell their story. And sometimes the second best question you can ask is why. It's sometimes, the shortest questions are the best ones that get people to really get at the heart of what they've gone through and what they're looking forward to as well.
How do you create that safe space? Because when you do, that's when you get the best responses from them.
You create it first by earning trust. The first initial ask is very important. If you're reaching out to somebody who's gone through an illness or a family member's death, you have to kind of empathize with them first, sympathize to what they're going through and showcase that, because we're all human, we've all gone through these things. But it's also a matter of communication. It's just a matter of letting them know that you're there for them. You're there to they're trusting you with their most heartfelt story. You know what I mean? So you have to respect that story, be grateful that they're allowing you to tell it, and then tell it in the best way you can. And that just starts with communication. As it breaks down to communication can solve a lot of things, and this is one of those instances as well.
When you say that your goal, and obviously your awards speak for themselves, but to tell their story, whoever the subject is, the best way you can, what is the best way you can tell a story, and what does that look like?
I think the best way you can tell a story differs with each subject. I think each story that you do, you go into it with an idea of the structure, whether it be a creative start to it before you go backwards in time and then tell the whole story, or if it's just starting out simply. Sometimes you try to get out of the way and just let the story tell itself. But creativity and ideas will always have a place. Um, and I think the more you talk to the subjects and the more you get to know them, the more brainstorming will just inevitably happen, and subconsciously or consciously, and you'll end up at the best route. And you'll have interviews that last 2 hours for four different subjects, and you're trying to get it down to a 5-minute piece to make time on linear TV. And that's still the business we're in, and it's just a matter of trying to tell it in the most streamlined way possible that still hits all the notes that you want to hit of the human element.
If there was a 5-minute feature on you that hit all the elements that needed to hit telling your story, what would it hit?
That's a good question. I think it would hit on, my upbringing first. I grew up in Virginia, under a very heavy Virginia Tech family. So before this year, Tech was known as a pretty good football program. So grew up going to those games with my family. And because they were good, I got interested in Virginia Tech football, which then made me interested in other sports. And then it just, spiralized from there. My mom would yell at me saying, you can't just watch Sports Center all day long. What are you going to do with that? And now I get to rub that in her face every day. And then I went to Hampden Sydney College, a small D3 school, because I realized, I needed a small school experience, and some people need different things. And what I was able to do there is kind of ingrain myself in all the sports there, which helped me to land the job at ESPN. And then from there was able to showcase talents enough to get into the features world, and came up under Tom Rinaldi, which, is like learning basketball from Michael Jordan. Learning features from Tom Rinaldi is a pretty good way. And other people, obviously, they have a great department there for learning structure and learning writing for the narrator of the actual piece, which is very important, and collaborating. And then was able to move over to Golf Channel and tell the stories from the golf perspective. But yeah, I think at the heart of it is, family, because I think everybody, there's a butterfly effect for everything. But I don't think, if I didn't grow up in a family that loved sports, I don't think I would be here today. But sports has always been the constant in my life.
Sports has always been the constant in your life. Jarrod Ficklin is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. But the idea that you could make a living in it, and interesting to hear your mom's perspective. She loved you, she supported you, but she didn't know that that was a career. For you, deep down, and you think about your talents early on, Jarrod, the idea of believing in yourself, listening to yourself, and sort of blocking out the noise and knowing that you could do this, even if other people had other thoughts about what you should do. How did you find that inner voice to stay true to yourself through that early process?
I don't know if you ever really find it, Brian. I think sometimes, there's definitely signs along the way to point you in the right directions. I just came from, sports was my constant. I liked writing. I liked sports. I was terrible at math, terrible at science, so in a way, you just become more self-aware of what your strengths are, and then you try to channel it in a certain way. So I love my mom to death. I'm not, I'm not just, give her a hard time, but she was right of like, that's not something you really forecast. And I don't even know if I really forecasted, working in the line that I did. I just always knew I loved sports. I wanted to work in them somehow, and wanted to put every initiative into doing that along the way. And I'm very much a firm believer in, like, you take care of the small things, success will just follow. Big things will follow. So that's all I've tried to do, is just stay in my lane with, somewhat of blinders on, and just kind of focus on what I'm doing and channeling my interests and my passions into each task for that day. And then, eventually the big end will come.
The idea of putting on the blinders and working on a piece, and say you're in an edit bay, and Tom Rinaldi's over your shoulder, and you're figuring out what is going to make it on air and what's not, and how you trim it down as far as the story. What is he telling you during those moments?
So it's been a while since I worked with Tom, but it's each one of those initial experiences was a lot of listening. He had a great reputation at that point, and so did Gene Wojciechowski and everybody I got to work with at ESPN. and what they do the best of is collaborating. They listen, they write something, they ask an opinion, you go back and forth, you're on the phone for a couple hours writing the script and honing it in and trying to get it to time. And it's just a back and forth constant communication. And if the communication is open, the end product will be successful because you're collaborating, and then you bring in other people along the way, and the managers, and everybody has their opinion, and everybody has an experienced opinion. So you listen to each one, and it kind of teaches you some own self-awareness of what the next one will go like, and what works, what doesn't work, and you kind of just do those tasks as they come, and just stay open to every change that there is.
For as much listening as you do and how important that is to get better at your craft, what do you want people to listen into when you speak?
That's a good question. I think listen to the heart of what the story is. Um, I think sometimes people think feature reporting is just like, oh no, you interviewed each person for 2 minutes and that's exactly what they said throughout the whole thing, and don't realize that, each person's interviewed for sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 20, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes four. And each second, each frame of each feature story is methodically thought over. It's, you pour your heart and soul into it because these people are trusting you with their story. So from the executive producer down to the coordinating producer to the director, the producer, everybody that's involved, um, very much cares about it. And if they do all care about it, then the best story comes out in the end.
The idea of feeling a source of, I don't know if pressure is the right word, Jarrod, but as you said, to tell the story the right way, the way in which the interviewee wants it to be told. How do you deal with that dichotomy of wanting to make sure that they're satisfied, but then also wanting to make sure that your bosses and your network is pleased with the product as well?
Yeah, it's good. It's a balance for sure. I look at it as, we're journalists first off, so you have to get the facts of the story correct. But when it comes to telling somebody else's story, I try to look at it more positively of, there's a difference in looking at things under pressure or it being an opportunity. And I try to look at it as more of like, these people are trusting you with the opportunity to tell their story as opposed to the pressure. And I think that kind of helps in a way alleviate some of the pressure. And, you're able to get at what their actual story is if you look at it more as an opportunity to tell it in a creative way and in a honest, truthful way.
The honest and truthful way of how extreme your Virginia Tech fandom is as a child. What am I going to learn about how far, as a fanatic you are in supporting Virginia Tech athletics?
Well, so my first home game was 1993. Um, I was in fifth grade when Mike Vick led him to the Sugar Bowl against Florida State. Went to a lot of games in Lane Stadium, and I like to say, 93 was the first real winning year under Frank Beamer. So I always like to teach my family and say, they only became good because I started going to the game because we had Bruce Smith and that was about it. But yeah, I know I love the history of the game of Virginia Tech, of all college football, and I could spend hours talking college football with you, but I don't want to bore everybody with the encyclopedia.
Well, the idea of you being a mental encyclopedia of stats and facts and sporting events, and to piggyback off of that, in the idea, Jarrod, of how much nostalgia plays into being really good at telling stories, and you really, as you're talking, the way in which you're able to remember right off the bat, I was there 1993, and I'm sure that you can relive that moment like it was yesterday mentally. The idea that your brain can work like an encyclopedia, that you have a fondness for nostalgia, how does that make you a better storyteller in the long run?
Well, nostalgia is one of those common things. So like the etymology of nostalgia, I think from the Greeks, like one of the words is pain. It's truth and pain and what it can all encapsulate. And nostalgia is a common human theme for everybody. whether it's, especially in golf, whether it's a father-son story, whether it's a father-daughter story. A lot of people that play golf learned it from their dads, and it's a matter of hitting on those certain notes. Um, I won't lie to you. Like when I'm searching for music for a piece, a lot of the times one of the first words I search for is nostalgia that describes the
Wow.
song. So it does hit. It always hits certain notes, and most people in this world have a place they go to for comfort and a place they go to for their childhood, and that's kind of where the root of all emotions stem from. So we try to, the more you play on that, the more you hit those common threads for most viewers.
Final question for you. Jarrod Ficklin is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. In finding all of those common threads that you think the viewers are going to appreciate, what is it about your work that's healing for you?
I think it just lets you know that other people go through things. This life, it's not a cliche. I mean, it is cliche to say life's hard. It is. And there are certain moments that people face every single day, every single year that, the older you live, the more you're going to go through. And the more you see other people go through it, and in my own personal view, you feel for them, but you also, when it happens to you, you're able to compartmentalize it better,
Sure.
able to sit with other people and understand more what they're going through, and realize sometimes the best thing you can say is I'm sorry, and just listen to them and just be, you know, there's the great old phrase that God gave you two ears and one mouth for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, the more we listen to people, the more we understand where they're coming from, the more we'll be able to cope with it ourselves when we go through it as well, because you see where everyone's coming from at all times.
It goes to show you, Jarrod, just the empathy gene gives you that depth. And when you have that depth, your ability to tell stories is that much more vast. And you can do so much power through the art of storytelling when you have that depth, which you do. And it's really fun to learn the way in which you've navigated, and it's been cathartic through this experience as well. And the 6-time National Sports Emmy Award winner, I got a feeling you've got a few more coming in your near future here, so we might have to update
We're around a
this.
great team, so you know more than anybody. This business is a lot about who's in your corner and who you're behind and who you're working with. So I think as everything in sports media, it's all about who you work with as well. So I appreciate everything you're doing as well, giving everybody a platform to, like you said, tell their own story.
Jarrod, I'm Bryan Fenley. Your selflessness coming out in a big way in this conversation. Appreciate you so much for joining me.
Appreciate you, Bryan. Take care, bud.